good evening to all of our witnesses, Paula, Emily and Adam, and thank you for your contributions. And I suppose, as is natural with young people, a lot of the focus is on education, where you spend most of your youth. We all do, or we all did. Well, some of us, that's a long time ago, but anyway. I'm just wondering, in your opinion, are we a long way away yet from a truly inclusive education system? Because I've just come from a presentation in the AFE room where representatives from 3 special schools located in different parts of the country were there, both parents and staff members, and talking. Actually, their focus was on the removal of the therapies from special schools in 2020 and the call for those to be reinstated. And I know a pilot programme was announced, but it hasn't actually been launched. But it's just, I feel myself that therapies in special schools and in our mainstream schools as well are vital, should be. I just feel the CDNTs are not working. The progressing disability, I agree totally what you said, Adam, there about having a stakeholder-led review. I really think we need to get to the nub of the problem with the CDNTs. Why is that not working? Children are missing out so much, and they're just not being given a fair chance in life. They're not getting the supports that they require to get an education and then to progress to further education or to training or to employment, and to live independently. And one principal actually said there, like, she has witnessed, I think, 4 of her students, some of them quite young, going into residential care because the families can't cope, because the children are not getting the supports they need. So it's just, on inclusive education. But when I mention inclusive education to many parents of children with additional needs, they are often very, very nervous because they feel, they'll just, they have a vision of going into a mainstream school and not getting the supports they require. So, and I totally understand where they're coming from, because there's some excellent, I know, Paula, you don't like the term special school, but there's some excellent schools there for children with additional needs. But how many of them could be actually educated in mainstream schools if the proper supports were put into schools? And I totally disagree, or I totally agree with the lack of awareness and proper understanding of disability among many of our teachers and SNAs. Some have some understanding, and I have to say the majority do try, but unfortunately they're not fully trained, and that's one of the reasons why parents are going to the special schools rather than into the special classes or the autistic classes in our mainstream school. Also, the AAC devices, Adam, you mentioned those, and they're very slow. I just had a parent last week telling me that her son is preverbal. She feels he would benefit so much from the AAC device, but she's getting knocked back all the time by the CDNT, who should be providing this device, by saying, she needs to do such a course first and another course second, and those courses are full, and she's going to have to wait till sometime next year. And she's just saying, she's panicking because she's saying, her son is missing out on vital supports prior to starting school. I'm just wondering, have you any advice on that, or how to speed up that process? And can I just commend both your organisations on having your youth wing, established, how important that is, both to be advocates for yourselves, for issues that affect youth, but also, as you say, for a social outlet as well, and for young people sharing ideas and supporting each other. And I think that's really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy, and also just want to recognise the Sinn Féin motion last night, and we very much appreciate the engagement we had with you in that regard. In terms of inclusive education, I'd want to recognise at the outset that we see fantastic examples of inclusion on the ground, but our concern is that it's still something we remark upon when it happens for an autistic child, where we would never expect any less for a neurotypical child. It's very clear from this year's Same Chance report that a university inclusive education system is very far off for autistic young people. Families are having to fight to get into the classroom, but then really that is the first of a series of fights. What I would say is, to put it simply, I don't believe we will ever achieve an inclusive education system until we move to a rights-based model. And that is twofold. It's rights-based in terms of access to resources and services, but it's also rights-based in terms of training and regulation within the classroom. And I think it is those dual challenges that we see really erect barriers for our community across the country. In addressing inclusive education, I think it's important to say we see children within mainstream schools at present who are not included in school, and we equally see children enrolled in special school who aren't included in school. So when I'm answering this question, I'm not necessarily talking about the context of their enrolment as much as what actually happens within our classroom, because of course inclusion isn't just permission to enter a building, it's everything that happens from there. I think in terms of what are the steps we need to take to break down these barriers, in terms of our general election manifesto, there's a number of key asks. So we fully agree with you, we need to move to a model in which we see therapeutic supports provided within schools. I think it's important that we don't create a reality where those sorts of supports are only available within special schools, because I think that will actually lead to a scenario where more parents will be forced to choose that option as opposed to engaging within mainstream education. So I think that's important. Obviously, we've had the Epson review and we're still awaiting the final report, but we need to make sure that in the very early stages of the next Oireachtas that we see an Epson Act not just reviewed and passed, but fully implemented. And that has to include very firm rights to a right to be included in school, first of all, but also to access the supports that you need. But also critically, we need to see regulation and training. There is a reality that parents can enrol their child in a special school this morning, and the reality will be that they might be taught by a teacher who doesn't have any training in the field of autism. We saw a situation where more than a fifth of the students represented in our Same Chance report had been suspended from school in the last year. Very worryingly, when we see the trends around physical restraint and, for example, 12% of children being physically restrained. So we very much need to see much more robust regulation, and that has to be followed through in terms of mandatory training as well. Just in terms of the AAC programme, so our pilot programme that we are operating will be able to provide devices to 550 autistic children in the year ahead. There's a number of streams to that programme in terms of a borrow and keep scheme, and also in terms of one pathway for people who have speech and language support and another for who do not have that support. But I think perhaps what might be useful is if your office was happy to get in touch with As I Am, and perhaps we could engage with that parent directly.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Really appreciate it, Deputy. So I suppose for us in ILMI, we're really passionate around mainstream supports for young disabled people, because we understand and recognise that there's been a lot of work done thus far around, inclusion, and there's been a lot of wins. We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go still, unfortunately. And we just find that for a lot of young disabled people, because disability is still understood predominantly as a medical issue and as a personal issue, people can really see that they're the problem. And that has been raised time and time again in the Youth Collective, and the need to move away from that and actually have a mechanism where there is a pathway for DPOs to engage with schools and to link in with parents as well as a way of support to break down those barriers. Because if you, as a young disabled person, constantly believe that you're the problem and you just need to accept things as they are to overcome the challenges, then you'll keep on believing it, and you will actually, unfortunately, continue to have limited expectations put on you. And that will be the case within education and beyond, because as we see in particular with in-school supports, unfortunately they're just in school and they don't exist outside of school. So really what we would need is a robust investment in resourcing and investment in DPOs locally and nationally, and also as well within that then personal assistance service supports as well for disabled people who need it, and particularly young disabled people as well, because if there's personal assistance services support in schools and that is then the case outside of school as well, well then that basically gives a paradigm shift within the culture of school and within the minds of young disabled people and non-disabled people as well, and teachers, that disability isn't a personal tragedy, but actually it's a social and political issue. That really, when barriers are removed for young disabled people and things are made accessible, then that is actually a way of future-proofing for everybody and making things accessible for everyone. So really we need to be thinking ahead and putting the structures in place to make that a reality. And it will take time, but it is definitely worth investing in.